and welcome back to another very, very special edition of the Michael Decon program. Hello to all of you in the chat room right now. So glad to see all of you out there. To those who only listen to the podcast rendition, keep in mind we are always live out here on YouTube. Definitely come by whenever you can. Joining us tonight is Mr. Richard Syrett. He is the host of the Conspiracy Show and guest host on Coast to Coast AM. Richard has had quite the successful run as a broadcaster. His show is also syndicated in 40 markets across North America. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Glad to be back. Glad to see all of you yet again. For those of you who only listen to the podcast again, remember, we are always live on YouTube. Now, let's get down to brass tacks and bring in Mr. Richard Syrett and, of course, my partner in crime, Mr. Mike Hideous. What's going on, gentlemen?
Hey, Mikes, how are you?
Doing good. Right. Doing good. I'm glad
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. I'm glad both of you are here. What a tremendous time we live in. 2020 has been quite bizarre. Wouldn't you say, Richard?
Yes. Yeah, this is the year the rubber hit the road, I'd say. Everything that I've been talking about on terrestrial airwaves for the last 20 years is kind of out there on full display right now.
It really is. Quite bizarre. Not only do you have COVID-19 going on, there was also a mass shooting out there in Canada. Pretty bizarre, given the fact that that doesn't really go down very often. In Portapeak, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, we've had a few. We had one at a university in Montreal about 30 years ago, where women primarily were targeted. This one, on the surface, it seems kind of indiscriminate, although the shooter supposedly had a list of targets. We're not getting a lot of details up here. Quite frankly, and I've kind of left this one alone on the air just because it's still a little too fresh, and I don't have a lot of details yet. But I'm hearing some interesting things. One of which was there was a fire hall where a number of people were taking shelter, taking cover, and there were two RCMP officers there. I guess kind of, standing guard or standing watch. And then it was reported that two other RCMP officers showed up and started firing into the fire hall door.
Oh, my.
So that's a bit of a head scratcher. But I haven't done a full show on it. I'm still kind of gathering data. And I don't expect we'll get very much from the mainstream media up here. It's very, very difficult.
Right.
Difficult to get information from Amy. I don't know where you guys are located, but in Canada, I don't know. I don't want to be too critical, but most reporters up here are not fit to cover a house fire. There's not a lot of great investigative journalists, let's put it that way.
Very interesting. And there were plenty of fires involved in this case as well. And
yes.
Yeah, it's pretty insane what went down. For those that don't know, there was a mass shooting out there, 22 people dead, if I recall correctly. That all started allegedly because of the girlfriend. One of the reasons why he went out there on a rampage, they're saying. But who knows, right? We don't have all the facts just yet.
No, we have next to nothing, other than the official narrative, and this will disappear, much the same way that the Vegas shooting disappeared.
Yeah.
In the United States, this will quickly be taken over by some other seemingly inane story, or continued coverage of coronavirus where we're told like idiots, wash your hands, stay indoors. And yeah, this will be left to the citizen journalists out there to uncover the truth, and then they'll be roundly dismissed as crackpots, of course.
Oh,
It always goes down that way, but it is interesting that he had some sort of mock-up of a police vehicle out there. And of course, he had a uniform as well. So,
the shooter did. Is that what you're saying? The shooter?
Yes,
the shooter has a
correct.
uniform?
Yeah,
There's a
they're,
lot.
they're
Oh.
making
Mhm.
him out to be kind of a wannabe.
Yeah, it's odd.
Oh, okay. I was a little confused on that, but now I'm starting to see the picture. That's tragic. How many people? 22, you said?
22 so far. Yes,
And that was when? Yesterday? This week?
that was earlier. That was last week.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I was a little uneducated on the whole story. Tragic. Absolutely tragic when something like that happens.
definitely. And of course, it comes from Port to Peak. That's over there by, what is that, Nova Scotia?
Correct. Yes.
Beautiful
don't-
area, too. I've been up there. Absolutely gorgeous.
Most of us Americans don't really follow too much of what's going on in Canada, I have to say.
I didn't even see it on any news
Yeah, we don't get that much.
posts or anything about that. I mean, this is something I would consider major. Why we didn't hear about it is beyond me.
That's what happens. All the COVID-19 news just sort of took everyone's headspace there for a while.
Yeah.
And that's what
For
happens.
a while. Yeah, it's like more like
Well, it's
2
still-
months now.
Yeah. But Richard, before we jump into other subjects, I did want to ask you, how many shows exactly do you have? You seem like a busy man.
Let's see. I have my syndicated weekly program, The Conspiracy Show, which airs out of Toronto on AM 740 Zoomer Radio. And then I have roughly 38 affiliates throughout North America. And that airs Sunday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern. And then I have a podcast that drops 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. That's called Conspiracy Unlimited. And I'm quickly approaching about 400 episodes since that began. And then I fill in as a guest host on Coast to Coast AM, typically 3 days a month.
Very
And what do
nice.
you sleep like 2 hours a night?
Right.
I take a lot of afternoon naps. Let's put it
Oh, I'll
that way.
bet.
Yeah.
That helps. Yeah, for sure. I know what that's like. I always have to sleep for at least half an hour to an hour before doing this show. Out of habit.
Now,
Out of habit, man. It doesn't feel right if I don't, I gotta say.
well, he certainly has a lot going on, Richard. Good luck with all that.
Yeah, Richard's
Well,
a
it's
busy
it's
guy.
almost a living.
Almost.
Yeah, it's late where he's at. So I'm glad he's here. And of course, by now, Richard, do you favor any other show besides your own? What I mean by that is, aside from Coast, rather. Do you like doing Coast more or your own show? Which do you prefer?
Well, obviously, Coast to Coast is a huge platform. We're talking about millions of people listening. My syndicated radio program, considerably smaller, but the syndicated program is I sort of look at that as my child. I created that.
yeah.
I've been doing that type of radio for 20 years here in Toronto, so it's kind of like my baby, my child. Whereas Coast to Coast, I am a guest host, so it's like borrowing dad's car. You got to be very careful.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. I was about to bring up the fact. With that said, are there any topics that you cannot cover at all on Coast to Coast AM? I'm curious now.
I've never been told no. I mean, I work with a producer, a weekend producer, and he will suggest guests, and I will suggest guests. So I've never been told no. We don't even look at it so much as topics. It's usually like guests.
Right.
An author has a new
Okay.
book on UFOs, or an assassination researcher. But I can honestly say, and I know this disappoints some, they think that it's like a scene out of Network with Ned Beatty telling Howard Beale that he has meddled with the primal forces of nature, and you shall atone. It doesn't happen that way, at least in my experience.
Interesting. I thought there would be a few things you couldn't exactly touch upon.
There may be. There may be. Listen, there are certain things I won't touch upon. I will not
Sure.
go on and disseminate hate. Obviously,
Right.
I don't do Holocaust denial, that kind of stuff. That's just me.
Yeah, I wouldn't
What are-
expect you to exactly.
What are some of the topics that you favor most when getting any particular guest on your programs? Are there any type of topics or subjects you enjoy most?
Well, what we're dealing with now with the lockdown and certain international organizations peddling one narrative and different nation states peddling another, that to me kind of encompasses one of my favorite areas, and that is globalism versus the nation state. That's the titanic struggle of our age. And that's what we're seeing play out right now. And that's something I've talked about for 20 years, or I've talked to people about. I mean, I need to draw a distinction. I'm more comfortable usually asking the questions. So
That's
I'm
true.
the interviewer. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist per se. But I talk to people who are,
Right,
or I
right.
talk to people who have various theories. Some of which I think have a great deal of credence, and others maybe not so much.
Right.
But my job is just I provide a safe and respectful platform, and then I ask the questions, and I offer an opinion here and there where I feel appropriate.
Sure.
By and large, I let my listeners decide for themselves.
That's
but
a lot like what we do here.
yeah,
Sorry.
I'm an avowed nation state guy. I need to be clear about that. I believe in the nation state. I don't know about down in the U.S., but now if you use the word a nationalist, people get all uppity. And I don't, big middle finger to anyone who says that. I'm a nationalist.
Good.
I'm a
Good. Yeah,
nationalist.
you and me both.
I believe in the nation state. It is the institution that is best suited to safeguard our individual liberties, although it's not doing a hell of a job right now. But better than that, then we're taking our orders from some faceless bureaucrat in The Hague or Brussels or I don't know, Bern, Switzerland, or wherever they would decide, that the New World Order international headquarters would be located. Because people often find their government in Washington, or in my case, Ottawa, to be distant and unresponsive. It could be a lot worse, folks.
Yeah, I
Sure.
agree. And Richard, now out of curiosity, going back to the conspiracy angle here, what exactly was the catalyst for you to sort of go down this road here? Aside from, let's say, talking about maybe political matters, why the conspiracy fringe?
I started off in current affairs talk radio. I was a producer, so I was behind the scenes booking guests, and it was a news talk format at the station. So we would cover provincial politics, municipal politics, what I call the workaday reality: garbage strike, a provincial budget, a federal election. And one day, the program director offered me my own show. In those days, the radio stations, I thought, did a pretty good job at trying to promote from within and try and develop their own talent. And so I was given a show on a Sunday night, and I had to figure out how to fill 2 hours. And I didn't want to talk about what everyone else was talking about. First of all, there were people that did a far better job or could do a far better job than I. And quite honestly, my heart wasn't in it. I kind of had a belly full of it, producing it Monday to Friday. So I had to figure out how to fill those hours. And, Art Bell certainly was a huge influence, and a TV show that I remember from a kid hosted by Leonard Nimoy called In Search Of.
Right.
Yes.
Good show.
And I used to like programs. I don't know if you remember or old enough to remember Rod Serling, not The Twilight Zone. I'm even too young to remember that, although I saw it in reruns. But he had a show in the 70s called Night Gallery. And there was another show called The Night Stalker, and so
Yes.
I was always sort of captivated and enthralled by that type of programming. And so I figured, and it didn't infuse my brand new show on Sunday night all at once. I kind of introduced it bit by bit, and then eventually it just kind of took over the show. And then of course 9/11 happened about maybe a year and a half into my first go round on the air.
Oh, okay.
And after that, naturally that changed everything.
That's what it was. Yeah. For a lot of
Yeah,
people
so
too.
it went from like Bigfoot trackers and the Loch Ness monster to and vampire slayers to pretty heavy, intense geopolitical subterfuge at that point.
Nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. And of course, eventually you got a call from Coast. What was that like for you?
I always compare that to get like playing in the. I don't want to be harsh, but it was like playing in the minors and then getting a call up to play for the Yankees.
Understood.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I don't want to. I'm not saying that Toronto is a minor league station. Not at all. It's the fifth largest radio market in North America. It's a huge market. It's fantastic. But in terms of the reach, the platform, going from a single station at that time to a show that had over 600 affiliates and millions of listeners.
Yeah.
So. And I had no expectation other than that it would be a one-off. It was actually my lovely bride's doing. She had encouraged me. She sent a package to at that point, he was the vice president of talk at Premier Radio, and he happened to be from Montreal. So he was a fellow Canuck. And my wife, who I call the mighty Aphrodite, she said, oh, she somehow found out he was from Canada. And she said, you should contact him. He might think it's kind of cool to have a Canadian guest host. And I said, oh, come on. Are you kidding? And she was persistent and sent the package away. And a few weeks later, I got a call from this gentleman asking me if I would like to fill in for George Norrie on a Friday night because he was taking the night off for his daughter's birthday, as I recall, and practically fell out of my chair and then went and kissed my wife. And gave her a big hug and said, it happened, I'm on. So that was in 2009, and I did the show. And I didn't think, to use a baseball analogy, I hit it out of the park, but I thought it was a serviceable, maybe stand-up triple. But I didn't hear from them for about 5 years after that. And then in January 2014, I started to get a call regularly, and ever since, so it's been over 6 years. I'm doing typically usually 3 shows a month.
Nice.
That's pretty good. Hey, you definitely did hit it out of the park. You're still there, Richard.
I'm a survivor.
Yeah, you really are. You really are.
Slow and steady wins the race, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I agree with you on that. And of course, plenty of people have complained about other guest hosts on Coast, but you're someone who's actually quite loved and respected.
Well, it wasn't always thus. Anytime someone new comes along, there's always going to be resistance and some apprehension and some even a little bit of nastiness.
Sure.
Like, who is this guy? Because you're coming into their living room or their bedroom or wherever. And if you're perceived as an interloper, and I guess I was in the beginning, then people don't like change. Coast to coast, it's a comfort, it's a friend. And so when someone else comes with a different voice, a different timbre, a different pace, a different rhythm, it's a little unsettling for people. They're relaxed, they're getting ready to go to sleep, and they want that comfort zone. And until you put the time in the chair, you're not going to be, welcomed immediately with open arms. Not by everyone, certainly. And you hear from the dissenters, believe me. But gradually, you win them over. And they're not everybody. There are still people, I'm sure, who shudder and scramble to hit the off switch or whatever whenever I come on. But for the most part, people have been very, very welcoming and gracious, and uh, through time spent in the chair, you win them over and you become part of their family, and that's a real honor and privilege, and uh, that's one of the wonderful things about radio. I've done television, I've done radio, but the bond that you have with the listeners in radio, there's nothing like it. Late night radio, best audience in the world.
I agree. And of course, you were trying to do, or did you do the pilot of your radio show on television, I believe, right?
I did a TV show. We did 4 seasons. It was based on the radio show,
Right.
the conspiracy
Okay.
show. It was just kind of a branding thing because the owner of the TV station here in Canada also owned the radio station. So, but it was a different show. For the most part, it was shot in the field on location. We traveled all over North America to England for part of season 2 or 3. I think we were in England, and yeah, we did 4 seasons. It aired across Canada. It aired for 1 season in the U.S., Australia, Poland, the Italian-speaking market, I think Vietnam, parts of Africa. So yeah, we did 4 seasons, about 60 some episodes.
Damn. Oh, right. Mike, did you have something to say? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, in reference to the whole getting onto a new show, people are fickle. They become comfortable in their
Right,
their
yeah.
things, especially with entertainment. And they see somebody or watch a show, they get used to the people who are either acting on it or doing the talk show, the talking heads. Get somebody new, just like anything in entertainment, a new musician in a band, a new actor in a movie. People are fickle. They get frustrated. So yeah, I know what that's like.
Yeah, to tag on to that, especially in something like a radio or in music, well, just in everything in general, but
Yeah.
crowds are won and lost, and then, of course, you win them over eventually. That's kind of the
But
way it
not
goes.
everybody. Not everybody. Like Richard said, you can't
Win them all. True.
and you can't please everyone
Yeah.
either. So you're going to get an audience who likes you. They like you. If they don't, you move on.
Right. It's about building trust, and I bring my bag of tricks. Everybody has their little their routine, their bag of tricks. I have my kind of a patented show opening that I use every time I'm on, and people have responded well to that. And I like to kind of craft my opening. I also, everybody who hosts and guest hosts has their own taste in music, so I get a lot of positive response from the bumper music, because we get to choose our own bumper music, and that's actually one of the fun parts of doing the show, picking my own bumper music. And I have a very eclectic taste in music, and I like to talk about the music a little bit on the show. So I might mention the name of the artist and the name of the song and maybe a bit of a backstory. Or even the record label, hey, that was Freddie Scott. That came out in Stax Records back in 1968. So that kind of thing. I was never a DJ, but I kind of like to, because the music is an integral part of the show.
I agree.
So I like to make it part of the show and kind of tip my hat to the artists as well.
And Richard, at this point, you've been doing it for so long. Are you still excited or nervous before getting on Coast? What's going on there? Or do you line up?
Mainly excited. Yeah. I mean, if you're not a little bit nervous, there's something wrong. You're dead inside. So
right.
Yeah, there's some pre-show jitters. Mainly it's excitement though. Because I so love the medium. And I love connecting with listeners. I like the way the show comes together. I love the combination of spoken word and music. I've always loved that. So yeah, it's mainly excitement. Plus, I've had the pleasure of having some great guests, and some of them on Coast to Coast. I like to stretch my wings a little bit on Coast, or spread my wings a little bit, and sort of move outside the conspiracy paranormal box from time to time. And so once in a while, I'll have someone on who has nothing to do with either of those arenas. So most recently, I spoke with a record producer by the name of Brooks Arthur, who was the sound engineer and producer on a number of seminal albums, including Van Morrison's Astral Weeks. He produces Adam Sandler's comedy albums. He worked with Robin Williams. He's been around since the old Brill Building days in New York, with working alongside Carole King and Neil Sedaka and Neil Young, and Bruce Springsteen recorded his early work at Brooks's studio in New York, Studio 914. So and that was kind of a thrill, because I'm a huge Van Morrison fan, and Brooks actually had reached out to me. He's a big fan of the show. A lot of musicians love Coast to Coast because they stay up late. And
yeah.
You never know who's listening. And so one night I was playing some Van Morrison bumper music, and I always refer to Van as the Bard from Belfast. And Brooks heard that, and he reached out to me. He wrote me a letter, sent me it was the 50th anniversary edition of Astral Weeks, the album. So he sent that to me with a lovely note, and we sort of become friends over the phone and via email. So he was quite tickled that I would ask him to come on, and we did a 2-hour show, and the listeners loved it for the most part.
That's very nice. And of course, going back to the show you do, your own show, I listened to your interview you did with a remote viewer. I believe his name was Douglas Cottrell.
Yes.
That guy had some rather interesting things to say, and I'm not really much into remote viewing, to be honest, but there is some validity to the whole remote viewing project that went on out here with the CIA, and there's plenty of information on that, but that guy had some rather bizarre and fascinating things to say about COVID-19.
Yeah, I've known Douglas for probably 25, maybe 26 years, from back in the day when I was producing, and I would book him on late night shows that I produced. And I was never one back in the 90s. It was for late night radio. It was very popular to have like psychics on.
Yeah.
Because and it wasn't great listening, I always found, but it was kind of a lazy man's way of doing radio, because if you had a psychic on, the phone lines would go crazy
all the time,
because
yeah.
Everybody wanted their own personal reading done for free on the air.
Right.
But if I wasn't calling in to get my reading done, and I was listening to someone else having their reading done, it wasn't very interesting, I always thought. And so I always had an aversion to booking psychics. And so one day, Douglas's booking agent called and said, "Oh, he's a clairvoyant." And I said, "Yeah, I'm not really into that, thanks." He said, No, wait, you've never heard anyone like, he's not only a clairvoyant, he's also a remote viewer." And I said, "What's that?" And, was given a bit of an education on that. And I had him on, I booked him on with this host rather, that I worked with. And then I wouldn't stay for the show. I would book the show. Then I would go home and listen. And Douglas Cottrell came on, and he was doing this medical intuitive thing. People would call in, and they would say, "I've got a sore throat. What do you think's going on?" And Douglas would remote view basically their insides. They also call him the man with X-ray vision, or X-ray eyes. And he would like come up with this sort of this diagnosis, and the person on the other end said, "That's exactly right. That's what my doctor said." Or person would call in, "Can you tell me what's wrong? I'm in a great deal of discomfort." And you'd say, "You've got kidney stones." And it turns out, he was right. And he was just like batting 1,000 that night. It was maybe not 1,000, but it was just incredible. And so we had him on again and again and again, and we've become friends. And we've done some interesting remote viewing experiments over the years on the air. Once on Coast to Coast, or twice actually on Coast to Coast. We got all the listeners involved, and they had to remote view an object that was on his desk. So COVID-19. Yeah, Douglas was asked to remote view that situation, and back in February, this is on record, he was doing a video on YouTube on February 19th, and he said that it came from the Wuhan Level 4 lab. he didn't say that it was engineered as a bioweapon. It was engineered, but it was intended perhaps as a vaccine or as a way to try and combat these coronaviruses, and then somehow it escaped.
It's possible.
So that was Feb 19. Well, I certainly believe, based on everything I've heard, read, people I've talked to, that's the most likely scenario, that it came from that Wuhan virology level 4 lab. Whether the Chinese Communist Party let it happen, made it happen, or closed their eyes and were glad it happened, I'm not sure. But what happens is, once it's out there, then you have countless groups who seize upon that to sort of work their own agenda. It's the old saying, never let a crisis go to waste. So the Democratic Party seized upon that because they couldn't impeach Trump. So now, this is their last best hope to destroy Trump. The globalists are using this because they would love to invoke further authoritarian measures, mandatory vaccines, tracking, and empower international groups like the World Health Organization and the United Nations. So everybody's working their angle.
Definitely.
Yeah, they definitely want to take down this president in any possible manner they possibly can. And it's so at this point, I think it's a joke, because every time you see them go after him for some stupid asinine reason, it's like, you got to be kidding. They just jump from one thing to the next. They don't give up.
No, they're like rabid dogs, and I think the anger here is entirely misdirected. It should be, has President Trump said some stupid stuff? Sure, he has. But usually it comes from a well-intended place.
Sure.
So if he's talking about using light and disinfectant, it's it's coming from a good place. He wants to try anything and everything. But why are people not angry at the Communist Chinese Party, who tried to cover this up, who lied about it, who disappeared some of their top doctors, who tried to blow the whistle? Why are they not angry with the World Health Organization that ran cover for the Chinese Communist Party and lied and said that human-to-human transmission is there's no evidence for that? Why are they not angry with the House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who said, go to Chinatown,
right?
Or Mayor De Blasio, who said, ride the subways, or the New York Director of Public Health, or I'm not sure what her title is, who said the same thing. Go to a Chinese restaurant, enjoy Chinese New Year.
And on top of that, that you couldn't say the word Chinese virus, because then you were deemed a racist.
Right. Never mind that we still call it the Spanish flu.
The Spanish flu.
Exactly.
Yeah, the
It's
hypocrisy
ridiculous.
is out there for sure. And I'm definitely in the notion, about 75% in the notion, that this virus was not zoological at all. That this was for sure created in a bioweapons lab. And everyone we talk to seems to allude the same thing, the fact that it was worked on in China, then here in Fort Detrick, and then in Canada, and then back to China. And that alone leads me to believe that this was being modified, and in every remote location it was at.
I watched a wonderful documentary produced by the Epoch Times, and
Great magazine.
Yeah, it's a terrific newspaper, and they have some really solid investigative journalists, and I'm sure they have their own bias. I mean, I think they're sort of based out of Hong Kong, and obviously have a very anti Chinese regime point of view. However, they spoke with a number of immunologists and virologists who were of the opinion that after looking at this virus, it had all the attributes of what they called a recombination event. In other words, yes, it was not zoonotic. It was engineered. Now, there are a lot of reasons why you might engineer something. I mean, you might want to engineer it because you want to produce a vaccine, or you want to try and figure out how to combat other coronaviruses. So, as to motive, I don't know, but that's almost secondary now. It's here, and as I say, people are seizing upon it. And one of the great concerns is how willing we who live in ostensibly Western liberal democracies are willing to trade health and security for freedom. If I have to hear one more person say, "Yes, we're locking down, but if it saves one life, it's worth it," what a ridiculous thing to say. What a ridiculous thing to say. Obviously, all life is precious, but if we lived by that credo, none of us would ever leave our basement for any reason. We wouldn't get behind the wheel of a car because, well, it could save one life.
That's true. That's true. You know, I think another reason why there's been so much silence about this situation is because it's quite a slippery slope. As you've read, Mike, and I'm sure Richard, you've read by now about the U.S. government grant they gave to the Wuhan lab, the 3.7 million.
3.7 million, right.
I mean, it seems like everyone has had their hand in this.
Well, our government gave some money as well.
Yeah, $700,000, I believe it was, wasn't it?
Right. I'm not sure what the exact dollar figure was, and I don't know what to make of that. I mean, on certain levels, there's a lot of international cooperation and knowledge sharing, and even sharing of personnel.
Trump also did approve of this grant, by the way. But that doesn't.
The grant,
yes, he did. Yeah. But that doesn't mean he knew what was going to happen. That we don't have actual facts proving that at all.
No, in fact, as a matter of fact, I read an article today that indicated that now that he's becoming more educated on the whole thing, he said that grant is going to be eliminated.
That would make sense.
Yeah, in fact, I think he's talking about eliminating as much as he can, even from the 3.7 million, unless that's already a done deal. I don't know.
Well, I know that for years and years, people have been people in U.S. intelligence, Homeland Security, have been very concerned about the safety at that level 4.
Right.
And it's a lot like a country that has nukes and they don't do a very good job of safeguarding them, or the regime is a little on shaky ground. So, it's in your best interest maybe to throw a little money at that situation because, it could enhance your own safety and security. So that might be part of it. If they felt that the Chinese weren't doing a very good job, or that they needed some help in making that facility a little more safe.
Right.
That may have something to do with it. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. No one really knows for sure, but going back to the slippery slope, this highly dangerous research was also vital to extract information on the study of viruses and vaccines that go down in these P4 labs. This one is probably not as dangerous as the other things they've concocted out there, Richard.
No, if it was, let's assume for a moment that it was engineered as a bioweapon. It's certainly a low-grade weapon.
Well, the reason
it's not,
Richard,
designed.
Let me cut you off really quickly there. When I was going back and saying this thing was being transferred, I am just under the mass assumption that perhaps this virus was not completed exactly as intended. That's my conspiracy theory. I'm not sure if that's true or not. I can't prove that, but I am under the assumption of that. Richard, go ahead.
No, that's an interesting. I never had thought of that. That, in other words, it escaped before it was ready.
Most likely.
I hadn't thought of that. I hadn't heard that before. I'm open to hearing more about that. But as it stands, if let's assume that it was released and it was designed as a bioweapon, it's kind of a low grade weapon, which has the same, maybe even a better effect if the intent was to instill fear, panic, and elicit the exact response that they're getting, which is, shuttering the economy. We are quickly being dragged over a cliff into the abyss of what
Right.
could be a very, very deep worldwide depression. And even if it was a low grade bioweapon, basically the contagion was the fear and the panic, which was spread by the media by and large, and obviously the World Health Organization. So it achieved that goal. And now China supposedly is back up and running, although they may have misfired a little bit, because it's definitely going to come back and bite them in a major way. There will be some major retribution in terms of supply chains being reordered and trade deals and so forth.
Well,
I think we seriously need to reconsider China's place in the World Trade Organization. But for now, the world economy, in the West at least, is in dire, in grave condition.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. The economy has taken more hits than Michael Phelps, indeed.
Yes.
I gotta
Go ahead.
interject for a second. I did read something fascinating today. In fact, as a matter of fact, Michael, I forwarded it to you on Facebook, to your message, private message. You got to read it. It's a farmer talking about how they are currently now aborting calves from cows, euthanizing pigs. Pigs, cows are killing chickens by the millions. Eliminating milk. They're plowing over crops, and yet at the same time, after all these farmers are being forced to eliminate their crops and livestock, they are getting import shipments of beef that is obviously less safe than it being brought up in America, and other types of meat being imported from other countries. What the hell is up with that?
That I hadn't heard. I'd heard that the meat, the supply chain with regards to meat was in peril, but I hadn't heard that they were at the same time they were importing. Well, it makes sense. I mean, look what they're doing in terms of the visa program. Now, while President Trump said we're going to temporarily stop immigration, which is basically for 30 or 60 days, they're still allowing all of these work visas for temporary workers to come in and take, good paying jobs from college graduates.
Oh my, that I didn't know of. But yes, Mike, I did see some of that video with the farmer, and it seems like the food supply chain is breaking, they say.
That's right, and that is really another thing that I'm adding to this list of travesties that are taking place in this country.
Good Lord.
As a result of small businesses being forced to shut down. Now, it's time. We got to start stepping up and say, hey, look, it's time to get back to work. Yeah, this is a dangerous situation with the virus, and I myself have had friends and family who have been affected by this. But at the same time, I'm losing work as we speak, and you know this, Michael. I've told you all about it. I don't know what I'm going to do. It's not a good thing. And now I hear about this livestock. They're killing animals. They're just basically culling them and euthanizing them because they can't. It's a bottleneck. They said something to do with the.
There's no meat packers.
There's no meat packers. Thank you. That's exactly right, Richard. And so yeah, I mean, you've got to be kidding. And being an animal lover myself, this is a really big insult to me, because it's like, when something goes wrong with something that has to do with animals, what's our solution? Kill them.
Yeah, it's quite terrible. It really is. And by the way, Richard, I got to ask you, how are you handling COVID-19 out there in Toronto?
Well, as I often remark to friends, I've been social distancing for decades, so I haven't really noticed a lot. A
change for you.
In all seriousness, we homeschool our twin boys who are 13. We have for the last 4 years. So there's no interruption there. They're online. They have courses. I've worked from home for a number of years. My lovely bride works from home. Aside from suspension of some extracurricular activities, in particular tennis for the boys, which they sadly and sorely miss, everything is pretty much steady as she goes. Now, I have an elderly mother who lives about an hour and a half from here, who I would like, to see more often. She's 95, still lives in her own house,
Oh my.
is very independent, does very well. So I have a sister who lives close by. She'll take her tablet over, and we'll Zoom. We'll do a Zoom family get together, which we did at Easter. Aside from the horrible tragedy, the sickness and the death, which diminishes us all, I found a lot of silver lining, and that is just some quality family time.
Right.
We've instigated kind of a nightly board game session. We play board games with the boys or enjoy a movie together. My wife and I go for long walks every day. It's been some time to kind of slow down, reflect,
Get to catch up on the reading.
yeah, just kind of slow down a little bit.
Yeah, that's the good thing about this as well. I've been seeing plenty of my neighbors with their families and their kids and all of that. They're in their garages. It's good to see that sort of thing going on. And of course, I got to bring this up. No domestic disputes between you and the wife with the wife during the quarantine, correct?
We spend a lot of time together anyway, as I say, because we both work out of the house. And she makes me laugh every day. She just celebrated her birthday on Sunday, and we had a Zoom party for her. Her friends from all scattered all over, from Greece and Vancouver and elsewhere. And I ended the meeting with a toast, and that's what I said. She's the funniest person I know. So if I didn't see her every day, all day, I would miss that, because she has me in hysterics at least a couple of times a day.
Very nice. I'm glad everything's working out. Domestic violence took a meteoric rise out here. Some people are not taking shelter in place very well. And I can understand that to a certain degree, but life is all about adapting and evolving. And you know what happens very well, Richard, if you fail to evolve.
Well, yeah, this is obviously one of the major downsides is these poor victims of spousal abuse. They have nowhere to go. They're trapped with their abuser.
That's right.
And that's just a living nightmare. The abuser, can't leave and blow off some steam, or the victim can't run and seek shelter elsewhere. So it's unfortunately a perfect storm.
Definitely. And we're still pretty early on in the 2020 phase here, and things have really been turned upside down for everyone, not to mention the Pentagon acknowledging the UFO footage. I'm sure you saw that already, Richard.
Yes, I tweeted that out this afternoon. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, other than the USS Nimitz case, which was the F-18 fighter group off the coast of San Diego.
Right.
In a training exercise, saw these. They described them as Tic Tacs, the candy, the breath mint. So it became the Tic Tac UFO incident. And I believe it was one of those videos or two of those videos, plus another one from 2005 off the coast of Florida. Those were released at the same time as that New York Times article that came out in December of 2017, which acknowledged the existence of the secret Pentagon UFO study group. So many people look at that article as well as those videos as sort of de facto disclosure on the part of the government. Now they are finally admitting UFOs are real. And
but Richard, wouldn't you agree that a UFO can be anything that is just unidentified and not necessarily an alien from another planet.
Pretty much.
Correct. I've always said that you cannot deny that UFOs are real. The question is who is piloting
Right. That's my
these
point.
things. But we go back to the Nathan Twining memo back in '47, in which he's asked about these crafts in light of the Kenneth Arnold sighting and Roswell and so forth, and describes them as having aerial capabilities that far exceed anything we have. So yeah, that's it. It has cracked open the door. Ufologists had very high expectations that the door was going to get kicked right in, regarding what is the very nature of this phenomenon. I personally don't think we'll ever have disclosure, at least in terms of the president in the Rose Garden, saying yes, we are not alone. I don't think that'll happen in our lifetime. I mean, I have my own sort of view. One that I should add is not popular among ufologists. I'm a Bible believing Christian, and the only way that this phenomenon fits into the biblical narrative is that these are they're not intergalactic, they are interdimensional. Now that's once we put aside all of the more prosaic explanations that it's a meteor, that it's a comet, that it's a highly sophisticated U.S. spy plane or what have you. That's the 99%. When you're left with the 1% that can't be explained away, to me, that's the only explanation. Interdimensional, angelic, demonic, take your pick.
Rather interesting. Again, the year 2020 has been quite the journey, and we definitely are living through historical times, to say the least, Richard.
Yes, and it's there's a quickening happening. I noticed it particularly, certainly after 9/11. Historical events seem to be sort of ramping up, but even more so since 2016 with the election of President Trump. The news cycle now is it's like a trip hammer. You can't even keep up. Stuff is coming at you. It's like we're living at the speed of light. And it is, dare I say, almost biblical, prophetic. Some people, in biblical terms, they refer to this as kind of the labor pains, before the birth of the end times, I suppose, or the tribulation. And as with labor pains, they speed up. The period between the labor pains gets shorter and shorter. The pain gets more and more intense, and that's what we're seeing right now. It's someone on the radio, and you must feel the same way, I'm sure, both of you. You sit down and you figure out, what are we going to talk about tonight? Well, I remember there were days when I was producing talk radio, there was nothing going on. There was nothing to talk about. Literally, there was nothing. When was the last time you could say that?
Yeah.
Every day came out, Kim Jong-un, he's dead. No, he's alive. Boris Johnson might be on a respirator. President Trump is telling people to drink bleach. It's dizzying.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. It really is. And going back to conspiracies for a moment here, and I might get plenty of heat for even bringing this up, but where exactly do you draw the line completely in conspiracies? I mean, the litmus test for me is the flat Earth.
I'll even entertain that. I had someone on Coast to Coast, because it's not for me, to decide.
Sure, I get you.
Ultimately, what is truth? I mean, I have my own theories. I don't believe in a flat Earth, but if someone wants to come on and make a compelling case, and it makes for good radio, then bring it on. But as I mentioned earlier, there are places I draw the line, and one of them is, spreading hate. I won't give someone that platform.
No, that's fair enough.
can I ask a question?
Yes.
Richard, how do you feel about the quote unquote fake news and uh, the opinionated journalists and newscasters that are on news programs today, more so giving opinions instead of actually just giving the news? How do you feel about all that?
Ooh, yellow
Well,
journalism.
we've sort of been watching this for the last 30 years, really.
Yeah.
They started referring to it as a show. It was no longer the news. It was welcome to the show. And then slowly the journalists became pundits. They would, in order to fill time, going back to the inception of CNN back in 1980, I guess it was, so 40 years ago. And they imagined, a 24-hour news channel. And I think what happened was they found out that, they could only show high-speed police car chases from a helicopter so often. And up until a certain point, certainly as I mentioned, 2001, events just started speeding up, or even a little bit before that, maybe the OJ trial. But what they quickly discovered was there wasn't enough real news to fill the programming hours, and so they started creating panels. And they would invite guests on, and you would have one Republican squaring off a Democrat, or two Republicans versus two Democrats, and then at some point the host, who was supposed to be a journalist, a dispassionate observer, would kind of get pulled into the fray and might offer his own opinion. And then soon the journalists were showing up on the panel. And so journalists stopped being dispassionate observers, and they became opinion makers. And then they became the news makers. We recently had Chris Cuomo, emerging from isolation in his basement, supposedly after recovering from the coronavirus, and this was presented as a major news event.
That's true.
The journalist became the newsmaker,
The news.
and that's not supposed to happen. So there's that. Then there's just the fact that they are, all the polls, like something like 97% of people that work in the mainstream media and the news organizations are registered Democrats. They all donate to the Democrats. They are, and we have the same thing up here. We have our state-run media, the CBC. We have the CTV, Global News, Toronto Star, very left-wing. And our prime minister recently signed off on this was before coronavirus, a huge sum of money that was given to news outlets to ostensibly to keep them afloat. They were essentially bought and paid for. And, talk about a sharp contrast. Your press conferences with the president, where he's, basically, the reporters try to use him as a speed bag. Unfortunately, fortunately, I should say,
Right.
speed bag punches back. But contrast that with our press conferences with our prime minister, who has been in virtual house arrest, it seems. He comes out like a cuckoo clock once a day, and is served up embarrassingly lame lob ball questions. Nothing. There's no probing, no criticism. Again, from the bought and paid for media. It's if it weren't so tragic, it would be laughable.
And
Yeah.
Right. And Richard, is the term yellow journalism a racist term nowadays? I'm wondering.
Well, that's a good point. I suppose somebody somewhere will take offense, but no matter. They've lost the room as far as I'm concerned. A racist to me is someone who's winning an argument with a liberal.
Good point. You're a good man, Richard.
That's excellent. I got to remember that.
That's a good
really
line.
I like that.
It's a very good line. Going back to COVID-19 really quickly here. On the program, I said by Easter there would be at least 1 million infected. I was wrong, but I was also right when I said 1 million would be infected. That seems to be the case now in the United States, according to the Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center.
I think the number is probably much, much, much higher.
It might be.
They've only tested, I think, 5 million Americans?
I believe so.
And there was a University of Southern California study that looked at LA County. LA County was one of the first jurisdictions in the United States to lock down. And the mayor there was a former police chief, I believe, Garcetti. I mean, I have to laugh. They called Trump authoritarian, and they called Trump the dictator. Garcetti was on the news proclaiming that he would hunt down the 1% that are in violation of the social distancing laws, that he was tracking them on their cell phones. They're tracking them in their cars. So that's Democrat Mayor Garcetti. Now, back to the University of Southern California study. They looked at Los Angeles County, and they found that 300,000 residents there had antibodies, which proved that they had the COVID-19 and recovered. 300,000 cases in Los Angeles County. They were predicting 8,000. So the point here is that the infection rate is exponentially higher than we're being told, which means the case fatality rate, we're told it's 1%, or in some jurisdictions it's 3%. It's probably, given that remember, the case fatality rate, that's the numerator, that's the number on top. We can only make sense of that number with the denominator, which is the total infection rate. The higher the infection rate goes, then the lower the case fatality rate is. So instead of 1 or 3%, it could be 0.1%, 1/100%. In other words, it's a bad flu season, like many of us were saying from the get-go.
Yeah, I think many will agree with you on that. And of course, we do have Bill Gates out there who wants to vaccinate everyone.
Well, again, this is what I was talking about earlier, how what is so disheartening is, I look at this, and remember I said that there would be many groups seizing upon this, no matter how it originated.
Right.
Never let a good crisis go to waste. And so many will be using this as a beta test. How far can we push people? Okay, so we'll float the idea of mandated vaccines. Maybe we won't get people on board this time, but the next time a virus rolls around in 2 years, then we'll push it again, but this time we'll push it harder. And unfortunately, many, many people will acquiesce. We have become so soft and so compliant. Our generation and the generation before us and the one after, never having our mettle tested the way our ancestors, the way my father or my grandfather or yours.
That's right.
My father served in the Second World War. He survived the Depression. My mother-in-law lived through Nazi occupation of Greece and a civil war and a depression and all of that. We've never had that. And so we're so easily led and manipulated. And unfortunately, many of us are willing to give up a little bit of liberty, or maybe a lot, for a little perceived security. And that is the end. Then we're done.
Right.
It's too many. There's too many of this. The younger generation that seems to be their entitlement of wanting to get something after they're coming out of school, like, a job as a lawyer or a psychologist, and they don't want to do the minuscule jobs that we did as younger kids. When I was 16 and eligible for work, I wanted to get a job anywhere I could. And I had worked for landscaping companies and shopping centers, pushing carts and pushing lawnmowers. I wanted to buy a bicycle. I wanted to buy a car. Nowadays, it's like the whole world is just fixated on their iPhones, their smartphones, their computers, and the internet. And there's not enough focus on getting things done and being responsible for your own actions as an American.
Well, we have, I think, in large measure, our public education system to thank for that. Was it Khrushchev who said that we will bring the United States to its knees without firing a single shot? You will destroy yourselves from within. And that begins with public education, which are essentially giant tax-funded incubators that are churning out cohort after cohort of Che Guevara loving, Western civilization hating socialists.
Right.
And recent polls, 70% of millennials say they would love to live in a socialist country.
And they should move. They should move.
Yes, because they don't teach this in school. They don't, you don't show up at a block party waving a Nazi flag, but nor should you show up at a block party waving a hammer and sickle, which is equally as odious. People, they're not taught about,
Right.
they don't read the Gulag Archipelago by
Right.
Solzhenitsyn. They don't understand that Mao and Stalin were responsible for over 100 million deaths,
Right.
murders in the 20th century.
They don't explain that to these kids. And then you get someone like Bernie Sanders who stands up there and rants and raves about how great it would be to just give everybody everything for free. Well, where the hell does that money come from? It comes out of your pocket. They were talking about raising taxes here in America. What was it, Michael? Up to like 90%?
By the way, the funny thing is, most people who would want to move, they simply can't just show up and be accepted as citizens right away. I mean, they're unskilled for the most part.
Right.
That's the problem.
The one silver lining with this is that a lot of these left-leaning millennials are too lazy and complacent to get out and vote. They'll show up at a Bernie rally and then go home and smoke a bong with their friends. But thank God they don't have the get up and the wherewithal to get up in the morning and line up and vote. So we can be thankful for that.
No, I agree. I agree with you 100% on that one, Richard. And by the way, we are now entering the era of transhumanism, man meshing with machine. Richard, are you ready? Do you want to live forever, Richard?
No. I will take my allotted 70. Anything on top of that is gravy. But no, I can't wait to get to heaven. I hope that's where I'm headed. But no, this is down here on Earth. This is kindergarten, and I'm ready to graduate. I hope.
Amazing. And Richard, did you grow up religious at all?
I grew up in it used to be called the Methodist Church. Then it later became the United Church. It's Protestant. It was very big on fellowship. I had a wonderful childhood. I sang in the choir. I played in the church hockey league. I went to Sunday school. But it was a little lagging in the worship department. So high in fellowship, a little less so with worship. And then I met my wife, who's a Greek Orthodox, and I converted. It's a beautiful faith. It stands upon doctrine that is 2,000 years old. It is unmoving. It is a rock. It is eternal, and I find that incredibly comforting. So I am home within Eastern Orthodoxy.
Understood. And Richard, when you are not broadcasting, obviously you're probably with your family, but what do you like to do though, Richard, when the wife and the kids aren't around and you do have that freedom? What is it that you definitely fancy?
Well, if I'm in Greece and we spend some time there when we can, one of my favorite things to do in the whole world, when, as you say, I'm not with family, is to float on my back in the Messinian Bay.
Nice. Okay. Very nice. And
not something you get to do quite often, I would imagine.
Not as often as I'd like. But we try to get over there as often as we can.
Very nice. Very nice. And Richard, when was the last time you were out here in America?
Let's see. I took my boys on a baseball road trip last June. We went to Cincinnati, or as people in Cincinnati would say, Cincinnati,
Yes.
Cleveland, and Pittsburgh. So we're trying to do all 30 ballparks before I walk off into the sunset.
Before you part, yeah.
Yeah. So we've that was the last time. I must say, all three cities just spectacular. Beautiful ballparks, beautiful downtowns. I I've always felt sort of emotionally, psychologically American. My ancestors came to Canada from New Jersey sometime in the 1840s,
Oh, do you know where?
and where in New Jersey? Not exactly. No.
Because that's where I was born and raised in New
Oh,
Jersey. Yeah.
wow. Well, we have my wife's cousin, and she has family there, so we I love New Jersey. Beautiful state, and uh, but I'm very emotionally invested in the United States. I'm a big fan of the constitutional republic. I'm not a big fan of our parliamentary system. I follow your politics very closely. I love American baseball. I love hockey too, but
Oh
I,
yeah.
I really feel like an American in many respects.
Yeah, Richard is more American though than most Americans, to be honest.
He sounds it,
He's
right?
very
I mean,
American.
God.
And by the way, she blinded me with science. That's a listener in the chat room. They're saying Richard should be the regular host of Coast to Coast, and I have to agree.
Oh, God bless. That's very kind.
I
That's
have to
very kind.
agree. Richard does a fantastic job. Always has. Even though I do prefer you on your own show, Richard, I have to say, and it's mostly because of the commercials, to be honest.
Oh yes. Well, kind of yeah. That's a sign of a successful show. When you start complaining about the commercials, that's because everyone wants to advertise. Radio stations are going through up here in Canada and in the U.S. I'm sure the local mom and pop stations going through hard times.
Oh yeah.
And the hosts now they don't get to break for 3 minutes and go out and take a cigarette break. There are no commercials. They got to talk, forever.
Yeah, they do. And Richard, are you a smoker?
No, I've tried. I've tried everything. I tried hypnosis. Nothing seems to work.
That's interesting. And the reason why I brought up smoking is because there's some sort of a study going around that those who contract COVID-19, a lot of them are not smokers. It seems like the smokers have some sort of advantage when it comes to COVID-19 now.
Yeah, I read that. It just shows you how little we know.
Yeah,
about
we
this thing.
don't know.
The other thing they've discovered is apparently that people that have antibodies for it, and we're being told that those antibodies could be extracted and used to help someone. Now the people with antibodies, it seems, are getting a second round of COVID-19.
That's a very unfortunate situation. How long will this last? I mean, no one really knows. And my city right now is trying to reopen very slowly, which I think is the right thing to do. Cases are quite low out here, and I live in a very small town called El Centro, about an hour from San Diego, which is the major city that everyone is quite familiar with. But yes, slowly it's happening here. But
it'll last as long as we let them get away with it, really.
That's right.
I have been talking about for a month and taking some heat on Twitter, and I've been a guest on some radio shows and taking some flack because up here in Canada, I've been calling to open things up. And as I always say, a free people are best suited to manage their own risk.
Right.
I should be the one to make that decision. And if we can have essential services running, we can find a way to mitigate risk and get people back to work. It's not rocket science. And the healthy, we've never done this before. We've never quarantined the healthy. The healthy people have to get out. They need to be exposed. There's even some discussion. There was some doctors with advanced degrees in microbiology from Bakersfield recently. Their YouTube video has been banned. But these are doctors saying that we're actually hurting ourselves by quarantining the healthy because, they're never going to build any immunity. That means we'll never be able to get out of our basements and get back to work as long as there's one case in the world of coronavirus. Healthy people have to get out and get exposed to this. Let's pour all our resources into protecting and quarantining the sick and the vulnerable and the aged. Everybody else has to get back to work, mitigate risk where you can. But when you lock down the sick, that's a quarantine. When you lock down the healthy, that's tyranny.
I have to ask, Richard, would you, and Michael, back me up on this if I'm saying this wrong, but Richard, would you agree that maybe this particular virus is very much unlike anyone that we've ever dealt with before because it's been manipulated in a lab?
Well, assuming that it has, yeah. But every coronavirus that comes down is something a little different. Every influenza variant is different, which is why they're always sort of lagging behind with a proper vaccine. And I'm not a flu vaccine guy, but it's always something different. Um,
Be that as it may,
but no, we have to. I mean, as I say, the symptoms are for younger, healthier people, even middle-aged, healthy people. It's going to be a bad cold. We can't cower in fear in our basements.
And I'm not disagreeing with you on that. What I'm trying to say is that this particular virus, coronavirus, COVID-19, from what I understand, and again, Michael, tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but from what I understand, this particular virus was spliced with the strand of the AIDS virus, making it a potentially more dangerous, almost as if it was a death sentence right from the beginning, because it's got an immune an ability to affect the immune system much more strategically than a normal virus would.
Well, if you're elderly and otherwise compromised, 80% of the people up here anyway, at least 80%, are, and this is tragic. I'm not saying that just because they're old it makes any difference. It doesn't. But they are people in nursing homes. They are people with 1, 2, sometimes 3 underlying conditions. And so statistically, it doesn't. When I look at the data, it doesn't strike me as anything less than a bad flu season. In Italy, for example, their version of the CDC, the director came out and said, and this was back in March, but at that point they had, I believe, upwards of 10,000 people had succumbed, mainly in the north, again, mainly elderly people with multiple underlying conditions. And he said, we can only say at this point that only two patients have succumbed to COVID-19 who have had no other underlying conditions. We can't say, in all seriousness or in all honesty, what killed the other 98%. So there's a difference between dying with COVID-19 and dying from COVID-19. And I think what we're seeing, Pennsylvania recently had to roll back their death count by 200 because they're gaming the numbers. Do you know? So, for example, in the United States, if you're in a regular hospital admission, Medicare pays the hospital $4,000. If you're a COVID-19 admission, they pay the hospital $13,000.
Yeah, they've been getting more money for sure. I did read that.
Exactly. If you go on a ventilator, Medicare pays the hospital $32,000.
Right, and here's the issue. However, even though some people have recovered, in South Korea, the health officials were saying the people that were retested again, they tested positive. The ones who were recovered and allegedly healed. So people were testing positive yet again. That's the strange part.
Yeah, this is a curious one. It's a head scratcher. But we're not. At what point do we say the cure has become worse than the disease? When they start freeing murderers and rapists and arresting priests, I think we can say the cure is now officially worse than the disease.
Well, that I don't agree with you completely, but for the most part, this is a very slippery slope since everything is so new with COVID-19.
Well, we have to remember, during the Depression, it wasn't just about people losing their jobs. Millions of people starved to death. And if we don't right this ship very quickly, and the economy, if the United States economy falls off a cliff, the world is sunk.
Yep.
And we will see a deep depression like the world has never seen before. It'll make 1929 look like, boom times.
Yeah,
And poverty kills. Poverty will kill far more people than COVID-19.
that I don't disagree with. Um, Again, this is very new, and of course, new protocol has to be implemented. That's not to say that I want everyone to be vaccinated or microchipped to any degree, even though that's what's going on with Apple and Google right now. And I'm not very happy about that. Most people will go ahead and do it. They'll
Well,
go ahead and
grocery
comply.
Right. Well, grocery stores are running. How are they mitigating risk? They're taking care of their employees. They're keeping their customers safe. They are mitigating risk. They're open for business. Any business that can learn from that should be open.
That's right.
Yeah, and I agree with you.
Post office is open, fire department,
They just got to
police
do it.
peop-
They have to do it smart. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Right,
Well,
right.
We're a smart, industrious people. We can figure it out.
Yeah, that is what I'm getting at. I'm sure we can figure it out, no doubt. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, no, that's all right. Continue, Michael. I don't worry about what I had to say. It's all right.
Oh, I was curious what you had to say. I wanted to know.
No, it's nothing. Just keep going. It's all
Okay,
right.
I was just saying, yeah, we just have to follow a new protocol and be smart about it, no doubt. I definitely want things to reopen. Most people out there are just completely tired of being at home, which I understand. But for the most part, there are some people that they needed this time to reflect on their lives, I had to say.
That's definitely the silver lining. But I think we need to pay more attention to Sweden and less attention to the World Health Organization.
Oh, yeah. Amen. Sweden has done pretty well.
The
Go ahead, Mike.
people who are doing a lot of the complaining, we are so spoiled. We have all these luxuries, television, DVDs, the computers, the internet, the iPhones, the PlayStations, so on and so forth. And 100 years ago, they didn't have any of this. And if there was something going around and they had to stay at home or something, what did they do? They read a book. They talked to each other. They sang songs. It blows my mind how people are like, oh, I'm going crazy, and you're going crazy. Could you imagine if you didn't have a computer?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what would go on then?
Yeah, imagine if you lived in a third world country,
Yeah.
You don't have nothing to
Well,
complain about here in America, really. We got it.
If we don't fix it soon, we will be.
Well, we will be. We're gonna have to start
That's right.
rationing food.
Yeah.
That's the
Well, my
unfortunate part.
mother remembers, gas rationing and so forth during the Second World War. Yeah, those days may visit upon our shores very soon. And, not necessarily a bad thing if it toughens us up a little bit, because the worst thing for a free people is to get soft and lazy and complacent.
That's how the
And we
Roman-
have.
I
The
agree.
Roman Empire fell that way.
Yes.
Oh yeah. So Richard,
Yes.
I don't want to take up too much of your time. We've gone long enough here, and I appreciate the time you took to hang out with us here tonight.
My pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a great time. We will definitely have to do this again down the road, my friend.
Thank you, Richard.
Can I just give a quick plug to my?
Yeah, I was gonna say, go ahead
where
and-
people can find me.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if they go to the website strangeplanet.ca, that's kind of a portal. They can find my weekly radio show there, my podcast. They can subscribe, get my free monthly newsletter, Inner Sanctum. Subscribe to the podcast. Drops Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Conspiracy Unlimited podcast.com, and back on Coast to Coast Saturday, May 9th and Sunday, May 10th.
Very nice. Everyone go check him out on his show and of course on Coast to Coast AM. If you need some entertaining, definitely tune in and find Mr. Richard Syrett there. Richard, it's been a blast, an honor and a privilege to share the air with you, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thanks,
my
Richard.
friend. Take care out there. Mahalo.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Take care.
And there he goes, boys and girls, the one and only Richard Syrett. Did you enjoy that, Mike?
Quite interesting. Very serious man.
Yeah, I liked him. A lot different from the other Canadians we brought in here, right?
How many Canadians have we brought in?
We brought
on
in
the show. At least one, right?
At least well, I think we brought in at least two or three. I think our I'm forgetting exactly who the other guy was who was Canadian. Bill William. There we go. He's from Canada,
Okay.
right? From what I recall.
I don't remember. I know there was at least one guy that we interviewed that you had told me was from Canada, but if there are any others, I am unaware of it.
Yeah, John Kelly.
Okay.
You didn't like
John
him,
Kelly.
did you?
Pardon?
I said you didn't like him, did you, John Kelly?
Is that the religious guy that we interviewed?
No. The religious guy that we interviewed, it was, that was when was it? Like a month ago?
About that. It was like one of my first few shows.
Yeah. That was with Eric Gajewski.
Yes, Eric.
You
Right,
didn't
right.
really like him, did you?
That's
okay if
now,
you didn't.
come on, now
That's
that's
fine.
not fair. I never said I didn't like the guy.
You
I just
hated him.
didn't
Come
agree
on.
with- I didn't agree with his policies on religion, or the fact that only his belief system was going to go to heaven. But who else are you saying I didn't like?
I don't know. I just know it was him.
Well, yeah, you're
It was
right.
pretty funny. That was a classic, though. Eric had no idea what he was running into.
Yeah, but I went easy.
Well, of course, we have to play nicey nice here sometimes. You know how that goes. But of course, we will return very soon yet again, boys and girls.
Well, hang on now, Michael. I got to talk to you about something.
Well, go ahead.
I am very concerned, in your opinion,
Which one?
about this this whole issue with the farmers and getting having to cull their livestock,
Oh, that's right.
cows, their chickens, their pigs.
We need to bring a farmer in here.
That would be a fabulous idea.
I think so.
Or I should say that is a fabulous idea.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully there is no shortage. I know
Wow.
Trump signed some sort of executive order recently to prevent the meat shortage problem that we are experiencing here in America.
Blows my mind. Just blows my mind.
It's a wild time, Mike.
I go to these shopping centers, all right? I go to shopping centers. I get my food, and yeah, there are packaged meats, chicken, pork, sausage, beef, whatever you want. But I just can't understand how they can keep open one food source and close down another.
Politics, Mike.
You know what?
There's always political reasoning behind their orders and decisions.
F politics, okay?
Well, I'm with you on that. That's why I'm not. That's why I'm not someone who is either on the left or the right or any organized political group. I think all groups are cults, to be honest.
Well, I got to send a shout out to Kathmandu, who sent me. She's on the chat room and on YouTube there. She was the one who sent me the link to this issue with the crops.
With the gentleman.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, it's fascinating. Like I said, finish watching that link I sent you. It's disturbing. And I was unaware of this until she sent me this information, and it literally knocked my socks off. I'm like, I'm appalled. I'm appalled because they're just killing these animals. There's nothing. We're not eating them. We're just killing them and throwing them out. I can't believe it.
Yeah, that's what we've come to.
It irks me that, as I said before, when a circumstance that becomes a problem involves animals. For example, out here, maybe by YouTube, but any golf course, golf courses attract Canadian geese, and the Canadian geese come down and they shit all over the golf course. So what do? They start killing the geese.
That's nice.
Right. Out in Africa, when the elephant herds get real big and start trampling some of the farmers and stuff, what do? They cull an entire herd of elephants, which could be anywhere between 40 and 150 elephants, male, female, babies. They just fucking kill them. And god damn it, that pisses me off to no end. No end. And now they're doing it to food sources, cows, chickens, pigs, whatever else, and they're just killing them, and we're not even using the meat. You want to talk about a disgrace? You want to talk about a sin? That, my friend, is a disgrace. That is a sin, quote unquote.
Yeah, there's a reason why they don't show those videos out there to the masses of the slaughterhouses, Mike.
Which videos?
Of cows being slaughtered.
Oh, please. They're horrendous. They're horrifying.
Yeah, don't watch that.
Oh,
That'll give you nightmares for sure.
Oh,
holy
just
hell.
Terrible.
It really is. So, boys and girls, we will return yet again Friday, May 1st with Jeffrey Prather and, of course, Dr. Paul Cottrell. That should be quite an interesting conversation there.
Are we not doing Thursday? I thought we were doing a Thursday show this week.
We don't.
Oh, okay. Did we have a cancellation?
I had to reschedule.
Oh, okay.
But for good reason, though. Good reason.
No problem.
Oh, yes. But, of course, we do return again with Mr. Kent Hovind. That would be Monday, the 4th. That's going to be fun.
And what's his background, Michael?
Well, he's an Earth creationist. I've mentioned this.
Oh, you did?
He believes yes, I did. He believes we coexisted with dinosaurs, basically.
Oh, that's
He's
right.
That guy. He's that guy.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. I don't know. I don't even know where to begin with him.
The theory, allegedly, the theory is that either humanity coexisted with dinosaurs, 5,000 years ago, or I've also heard that God planted the bones on the planet so that people can find them, and he could test their faith.
Oh boy.
Yeah, oh boy is right.
I already have a headache. Just thinking of this.
Yeah, you and me both.
He's gonna want to try to debate, but I mean, you really can't debate someone who is not backed by the facts at all.
That's right.
It's just ridiculous to even try.
That's right. And as you know, science is, all about facts. That's how we figured out how old the Earth is, how old the universe is, and so on and so forth.
Mike, aren't you aware that, dinosaurs were on the Ark?
Is that what they think?
Most of them do.
Because I never, ever read that in the Bible. And I have read the Bible. I didn't know that dinosaurs were on the...
Well, they moved the goalpost, Mike, you know.
Yeah,
I guess what they do. My God. Well, Mike, go ahead and plug anything you'd like before we wrap it up here.
Okay. Well, for anyone who is interested, if you're interested in anything in my musical efforts, go to MikeHideous.com, Mike with a Y, MYKE. And if you're interested in any of my artwork or photography, prints and originals for sale, go to horribleartwork.com. By the way, if anyone's interested, also I had made a couple announcements that there were going to be new T-shirts on Monday, being yesterday. Fact is, I made a little boo-boo on some of the files, and now I'm correcting them. Hopefully tomorrow that will be worked out, and they should hopefully be up by Thursday or Wednesday night. So I will let everybody know on my Facebook page, which is also Hideous Mike, facebook.com/Hideous Mike. Mike with a Y. Thank you, Michael Decon. Had a blast on the show as always. Thank you for having me, and I will talk to you Friday.
You got it, brother. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Love you guys.
Take care. And there he goes, boys and girls, the one and only Mike Hideous. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and of course, take us on the road with you wherever you go. If you are still traveling around out there, you can take us on the road with you on iTunes, Stitcher, Castbox, and I believe Spotify. International listeners out there, thank you so much for your support. Lots of listeners out there in Canada, Germany, and the UK. A few of you in Australia, which I really like. I appreciate all of you out there, and of course the mods out there who are getting rid of the scum out there. I'm not quite sure why we have mods, but they do a great job in the chat room. Very, very thankful for them. Now, of course, where we go from here is a bit of a mystery, and whatever it is that you do choose to believe, you must adapt now. All control has been lost, I'm afraid, and we are looking into the abyss without a rescue party in sight, I'm afraid. And there's nothing more frightening than reality. I hope all of you out there the very best. And with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, mahalo.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's Michael and Mike of the Michael Decon program. It's goddamn amazing.